Our guest today made his Broadway debut when he was just 10 years old. Since then, he's been in 4 other Broadway shows and has been nominated for a Drama League Award and an Outer Critics Circle Award. He is a filmmaker who has directed the award-winning short films Sign and The Ceiling Fan. When you're in the same room as him, you can't help but smile, but how could you when he has a smile that spreads like butter? And if you know Newsies, you should have gotten that reference. Uh, he is a ray of beautiful sunshine. Everyone, please welcome Andrew Keenan Bolger to the podcast. Hey, Andrew.
Hey, y'all. Oh, thanks for that sweet intro, Sydney.
Of
I
course.
loved the reference. The reference is key.
Yeah,
Andrew, thank you for coming on. We're so excited to have you because Sydney and I are obviously kid actors, and we're now transitioning into the adult theater business and all of that fun stuff. So we're very excited to ask your advice and like kind of understand where your journey took you. So you, like Sydney said, you made your Broadway debut when you were 10 in Beauty and the Beast as Chip, right?
Yes,
So
correct.
at that time when you like made your Broadway debut, did you know that it was something that you would want to do as a career, or were you kind of doing it like for fun?
I mean, I think a little column A, column B. I was a kid doing shows in my community theater in Detroit, Michigan, and had the opportunity to audition for a couple Broadway shows. And I truly believe my parents at the time, they were just thinking this might be a nice excuse to take a road trip to New York with the kids, and never actually assumed I would actually book anything. But Beauty and the Beast, it was like the second show I auditioned for and happened to get it. It was also one that while I was in the room, they were like, "Hey, are your parents in the like lobby? Can you bring them in?" And they told me in the room. They're like, "Okay,
Oh,
can you? We want to offer this. He starts next week. Would you be able to move to New York?" Um,
wow.
yeah, so it is a little bit wild how that came about, and I now looking back, I'm like, I cannot believe my parents made such insane
Yeah.
sacrifices. But it definitely was one of those things where I'm like, oh, I think this is getting real now. This is no longer just like a fun little hobby. Um, but yeah, I think as soon as you know how it is, as soon as you get to Broadway, you're like, I want to do this all the time. I would do this for free. I would pay to do this.
Right.
literally.
And sorry, my bad. Go ahead,
No,
Sydney.
go ahead.
No, go.
No. Go ahead.
Okay, fine, I'll go. So
Go.
no.
So then you were in a musical. You were in Seussical the musical,
Mhm.
and you did it in Boston before it came to Broadway, and that was when your voice was changing. So I want to know, and everyone wants to know, what was it like for you navigating your voice change in the middle of doing a show?
Sure. It was terrifying slash horrifying slash wildly embarrassing. I mean,
Yeah,
already going through puberty as any
not
person
it.
is just, it's not great. Like your body is like growing in weird ways and it's just super awkward. But then to get to do it in front of not only an audience of like thousands of people every night, but in front of a group of actors who you like really look up to. Yeah, it was not my best moment. It was interesting though. I mean, yeah, like you said, we were doing it out of town in Boston, and already Seussical the musical, for any of the music theater nerds out there, was kind of right off the bat. Uh, it was choppy waters for us. There were a lot of shuffling with like the costuming, the set, the some of the actors, like our director. So right off the bat, it was just like difficult in many ways. But it was also a really, everyone knew that there was a show inside of this. And I was, of course, one of the casualties, and rightfully so, y'all. I like truly could not sing that show without cracking every
No.
night. Um, but it was one of those moments where, up until that point, I think performing had been only something that brought me joy and happiness and something that I loved doing. And it wasn't until my experience with Seussical that I really understood the business of show business. Because at the end of the day,
Mm.
like, if you have one of your leads who is now getting to be too tall and can't really sing the show anymore, that is a business decision. It would behoove the creative team to pick someone who is more suitable for it. So it was a hard lesson to learn, but one that I grew to sort of understand later, um, and I think probably gave me a lot of like grit when I
Mm.
decided to return to the business, because I already knew that while this business we call show is something that can make you really happy, it's also something that is going to constantly break your heart, because
Hmm.
it's something you care about, and it's not always going to go the way that you would like it to go.
It's funny, Broadway kids are very different from kids who don't do theater, in that the literal worst thing you could ever say to them ever is, "Oh my god, you've gotten so big, you're growing up."
Yeah.
It's so
I
true.
used I used to eat candy in the middle of the night to stunt my growth. Um, I
Oh,
think it
sweet
worked for a little
baby.
bit. Um,
Yeah, it's
but
true.
did you get your voice change at 15?
Yeah, I was really holding out, y'all.
You were
Yeah,
holding out
Amazing.
there.
I was late, just period, just like with growing. I mean, I haven't really had that growth
No.
spurt I was promised. I'm still not that much taller than I was in Seussical, but yeah, I already had a very late voice change that I think I probably prolonged by trying to scream out whatever I could, like for as long as I could.
I was just gonna ask that. Like, do you feel like doing a show and like working those muscles constantly, like during that shift, kind of helped prolong it and also like helped your range when you did hit it? Because I did Trevor the musical in Chicago, and I swear that's why my voice didn't change till I was like a couple months before I turned 15. And it literally changed the next day when I was done like doing all of those high notes.
Oh
So
my
I
gosh.
I was curious, like, if that was kind of something that you experienced too.
Yeah, I think, well, it's interesting. I think it was kind of a short runway because I figured out how I could push out those notes. But I think long term my technique really suffered. I feel like I developed a lot of really, really bad habits that took a long
Mm.
time to kind of undo because I was so used to just pushing your voice like as hard as it can go without really just letting it happen naturally. But
Mm.
yeah, it was one of those things that by the time I had closed, I think my voice had fully changed, and I was just now an adult tenor just singing that
Oh.
role with terrible technique. But yeah, but for sure, you fear is like a great motivator, and it will. You will be
True.
amazed what your body can do if someone dangles taking away your passion from you.
Yeah, so true. It probably was a combination of you probably with your sheer willpower, you probably overrode biology. Uh,
That is a
but
good way to put it.
but you were among the rare group of child actors who were actually able to book a Broadway show during their teen years, which is so cool, because you were doing Seussical when you were, 15, 16, around that
Mhm.
time. So you've been in Broadway shows as a kid, as a teen, and as an adult. What was the transition like into adulthood, and what were those individual stages like? Like, do you think you faced some challenges as an adult that you didn't face as a child or a teen or vice versa?
Yeah, absolutely. I think when you are a kid, a lot of your career is about like being cute and adorable and all things that really just kind of can't you kind of got it or you don't. And I think probably when I arrived it was just all about like as naturally cute and then kind of had to build chops on like actual acting and technique. And then what I think sometimes is hard about that is that you kind of imbue a lot of your self worth for being that kind of like cutesy kid that when you are then an adult is less, they're diminishing returns. It gets less and less adorable to be an adult, like still trying to do the cute thing. And I think right when I graduated from school, when I kind of re-entered the workforce, I do feel like I was lucky in that I did not have trouble booking shows right out of school, partially because I was still able to kind of capitalize on being an adult who can play younger people. Like
Um,
early on, my like first shows were like Spelling Bee, where I was basically playing an 11-year-old still, and like Mary Poppins, where I played a young character, and of course
yeah.
Newsies, where I was still having to play a teenager. Uh, and then I feel like there is, while I was doing Newsies, I sort of saw the end of the runway coming, where you're like, I can really probably only play young people for a little bit longer. And I either need to figure out like my next move or move away from acting altogether. Uh, and one way that and that was just truly like, I know what roles are out there, and I know that there are fewer roles for people in their like mid to late 20s when they're kind of like a young character person. um,
Mm.
and I feel like that is when I started uh, trying to write and trying to possibly create my own kind of roles that I could play, or my own work that also brought me that same kind of joy that I got from performing. And I feel like it's only recently that I've started actually going out for roles that are almost my age, where I'm now auditioning for like young dad, which still makes me laugh a lot, but
No
occasionally they'll come
way.
through and I'll be like, I'm a grown
That's
up now.
Yeah. Oh my
that's
gosh.
also like the beauty of being a creator is if you know you're ever in a time where you need a job, you get to create a world that didn't exist before you thought of it.
Yeah, absolutely. It has been the greatest gift that when I was in college, I decided, my friend, perhaps you know him, Benj Pasek.
Oh, well, of
He
Who?
course.
Yeah, he was in my class at University of Michigan, and
Oh my
he knew
god.
that I really liked writing. And he, while he was like in school for musical theater, had begun doing a lot more songwriting with his writing partner Justin Paul, who was also in our class, and kind of convinced me to take a creative writing class at Michigan, which I did and immediately like really loved, and then spent all the rest of my time at Michigan. Any elective that I had, I would take a writing class. And ultimately, I don't think I was ever like, and then maybe I could write books when I grow up. It was more so, this is interesting, and this feels like something that's a little uncomfortable, but something that I think is worth exploring. And I'm so thankful now for Benj convincing me to do that, because I feel like I was able to get just a lot of experience writing when I was younger, or when I was in college.
Speaking of Benj Pasek and Justin Paul,
Yeah.
you two were in The Greatest Showman labs together. Is that right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Please
that's
tell me more about this because is it what? Because you were part of the developmental process of this incredible movie, one that is just honestly, it's one of my favorites. Is it developing it? Was it just like a normal? Did it feel like a musical lab? What was it like?
yeah, it was interesting. I mean, it's always so funny anytime I get to work with Benj and Justin, because they're always framing it as like, "Hey, buddy, can you like do us this favor? Like, we're friends. Like, do you just like want to come in and do this?" And meanwhile, like, Eli, we are in that room. That is like some of the most fiercely talented people in our business. I was just like
Right?
completely fangirling the whole time, and getting
Oh
to
my
like
god.
do hear all these songs for the first time. It was so beyond any of us doing them a favor. It was like really cool to get to see that process kind of unfold.
Absolutely. And just like being in that room that day, like just it reminds you of why you love art. It literally because that room that day was just so electric between Kiala and then Hugh
Oh my
Jackman telling Jeremy Jordan, "Hey, I got this. I'll sing the last song." When he has like cancer in his nose.
god.
It's
Yeah.
like it's incredible. Like it was just that I will never forget that day in that last reading in that room. It was just magical.
It is so true. I'm so glad that someone had the foresight to film that, because
Yes.
it was some of the most like electric. Like, I'm not a very religious person or even very spiritual, but I felt like the Holy Ghost in there when Kayala was singing, and then
Oh
like
my god.
Cynthia Erivo like got up and
Oh.
was standing on the table just like freestyle riffing at her. It was unreal. I was fully
Yeah,
losing
and you were
my mind.
literally like right in the middle of that. It was
Like
awesome.
singing like a tiny tenor line with my like little mouse voice, like the biggest voices ever coming at you.
I didn't
Oh
know
my
you
gosh.
guys were in the room during that video.
Yeah,
Oh
it was,
my
I think
gosh. What the
it
heck?
was the final presentation for Sony to like sign off on it and be like, okay, we're gonna do this. And I think Benj and Justin, they've always had such a producer mentality where they were like, we have some of like the best live performers. Let's like give them a performance, and
Yeah.
just stacked all the ensemble with like crazy singers, and just basically blew down the walls of Pearl Studios for about an hour and a half.
Seriously. And it was so funny because the Pearl Studios, it was like you have to like book the room. And so they named the room after Hugh Jackman's little gym group. And like so
Oh, I
like
don't think I realized that.
yeah, it was like Dog Man or Dog something, and that's literally his gym group name, I guess. That's what he told me at least.
Oh my
Because I was like,
god.
where did this name come from? And it's so funny because when we were done with the presentation and like we're leaving and we're going to the bathroom and stuff, like people literally came up to me and was like, those songs were so good. I've never heard them before. And I was like, just wait, it gets
You
better.
will.
Trust me. Yeah, and it like sure enough, like that then the album came out and like that just another star-studded cast. Like it was like, wow, this is like they're just keep on outdoing themselves. It's amazing.
Yeah.
Truly.
They're so talented.
Oh,
Oh
they're
my
the best.
gosh.
And Andrew, I wanted to ask, like, being part of those developmental pieces, I guess this is a good segue for this question.
Mhm.
You've also created a lot of work of your own, and you've developed a critically acclaimed web series called Submissions Only. So did that, like, being a part of those developmental things and your creative writing classes, did that have a big factor in why you wanted to create that?
Yeah, I think so. Honestly, if I'm really thinking of like the genesis of Submissions Only, which was a web series that I did with my friend Kate Weatherhead, it was, I wouldn't even say that like we we had such a great idea and we like really understood producing and developing from all these years of experience. I think we just thought we were newbies who wanted an excuse to hang out with our friends and like write something funny. And at the time also, Broadway people like were never on TV. We could not get
Mhm.
auditions because people were like, oh, theater people, they're so huge and campy. And now of course, like theater people all over television and film, they're like some of the best. But at
Yeah.
the time that was not the case. We could do like Law and Order, and that was like it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I
Which who
think we had,
hasn't?
yeah, exactly. I think we had no idea what we were doing. And I mean, we were talking about this right before you started recording. I feel like we are so lucky to live in a kind of DIY nation where these tools are more at our fingertips than they've ever been. And if you don't know how to do something, you try doing it and you'll probably just learn along the way, which was truly what
Mhm.
happened with Kate and I. And I don't even think it was until like halfway through shooting where someone called us the producers of it. And we're like, oh no, we're not the producers. We like wrote it and we're like in it. And then you realize, oh no, I guess I am a producer because I'm doing all the jobs of one. Um,
Right.
and I always, to this day, I will tell anyone if the best way to learn a skill is to just try doing it. It will
True.
be, you will get way more knowledge than taking any class or shadowing anyone. Just like try to make it yourself, and you'll immediately see what is working and what is not.
Hmm.
Totally.
It's honestly, it's like they say, if you want to know how to swim, you do a lot of research on it, but if you want to swim, you got to get in the water.
Ding, ding, ding. Yes, that's exactly perfect.
It's true. It's actually, that's such helpful advice, truly.
Yeah, and also one of the reasons that I was so excited to get your message, Sydney, when I heard that you and Eli were doing something, not only because I feel like we have a great shared history of being child actors, but anytime that I see someone in our business like just making stuff happen for themselves, like being a self-starter, being like a yes man, I want to like give the high five to those people, and especially with y'all where nobody's even asking you to do this. Like you're not adults yet, you don't have to worry about hustling and like making your next paycheck. The fact
Yeah.
that you're already motivated to do that, it gives me such hope for the next generation of theater folk.
You know,
Thank you. That's
it,
so nice.
yeah, thank you so much. It's so interesting when, being I'm curious to know if you feel the same way. Being a child actor from such a young age, I almost I feel like that kick started at least my drive to start doing stuff. And whereas normally society says go to college and then get a job. I've been working since I was 6 years old, and so I almost feel like that has just been played, that timeline has moved down a bit. But being that you were in the business at such a young age, um did you feel that same drive where you're like, oh, I just want to continue working? And also something that Eli and I often say
Mhm.
is being in the business at a young age was helped us to become more mature and more responsible, because we're always surrounded by adults expected to be professionals. Do you think being in the business at a young age affected you like that as a person?
I agree with both of those statements, like wholeheartedly. I think also when you're young and working on a show, especially if you're working on a new show, you are developing a lot of business acumen without realizing it. You're learning like what marketing is, like how to do interviews, how to speak about a project. You're learning about creation because you get to see a work develop. You're seeing how people do rewrites. You're constantly evolving a project. And so you're learning about producing and about being a creator from a young age, even if you think you're just there to do the acting. And then I think, at least personally, I can't speak for y'all, but one of the reasons that I have gotten scrappier and become a creator in addition to being an interpreter is I just want to keep doing this. Like I love theater people. It's I would say probably 70% of the reason that I went into performing arts as an adult is the community, and probably only 30% is like ever wanting to stand in a spotlight. That I do have passion for performing, but mostly I feel like early on as a kid, I met the group of people that I wanted to be like. And then also getting to spend time with adults like who were so self-actualized, and especially for me personally, I was knew that I was like a little gay kid when I was growing up, and getting to
Hmm.
see all of these adults who were living like beautiful lives, especially like in the 90s when I just didn't see that anywhere else. It let me know that there would be a place for me in the entertainment world um, if I worked really hard.
Yeah, 100%. The theater community in general is unlike any
Anywhere,
any
anyone else.
community in
Mhm.
the world. Truly
Absolutely.
incredible. And also, like, when I think of a theater person, or a I guess the Broadway community, I think of people who are resilient and uplifting and supportive and positive and just beautiful souls. And honestly, you're the epitome of that. You are
Oh,
so
stop.
so positive and bright, and you were just a light. And I know you were talking about, you wanted to be like that. You saw that, and you saw the people, and you connected with them. You're like that to people like us. You are that like person, that just bright, shining, beautiful theater light.
Oh gosh, that's really generous, Sydney. I also do think though part of it is me paying it forward to the next generation, and that I realized I was so lucky when I was 10 years old to get to meet these incredible adults who talked to me like an adult, who like took me seriously,
Mhm.
did not just treat me like the random kid who's like backstage with you. A lot of them, like I remember in Beauty and the Beast, the one of the like keyboardists saw that I was like really into Sondheim, and I remember he would like give me books and like cast recordings. And I make such an effort anytime that there is a kid in the room with me, that I really give them my focus, that I'm treating them just like any other member of the cast, because I know how meaningful having an adult figure in your life who you look up to, how meaningful that can be and how much that can change a life. So yeah, I'm glad that you think that. I have always put my money on young theater folk. They're the people who have like bought my books and watched my silly videos, and I think that they're some of it, how incredible and how lucky it must be to be a young person and to already have a passion, when so many young folks are just searching for like what is actually inspiring to them.
I love that
Well,
so
there's no
much.
doubt that like our generation and like us young people, there's no doubt that we all look up to you and we see like the stuff that you're doing for us and creating the work for us. Like all of that just means a lot. And so even the fact that like you were willing to come on and chat with us today, like that means a lot. And I just wanted to say like thank you from like all of
Oh,
us.
y'all, that's really nice. And of course, also both of you, like they're grown-ups who are huge fans of both of you. It's not like we are lucky to get to work in the same realm as you. I feel like Eli, the first time I heard your voice, I was like, ah. And then
Same.
Sydney, I don't even need. I've already fangirled out on you so hard for after I saw you in Fun Home, where I was like, "Are you serious? What's happening?" My mind.
It's so funny because you worked with my brother Jake in Newsies, and
Yeah.
Newsies, I think it's safe to say that Newsies is my favorite Broadway show, and I think I saw it 23 times,
Oh
and
my gosh.
I thought you guys were so cool. I looked up to you guys so much. I thought you guys were the coolest. But you play
Aw.
Crutchy in Newsies, who who walks with a crutch, obviously.
Aptly named.
um I want to talk about that, but before that, there in Newsies, there's a point in the show where you leave the stage, you don't come back for a while, but that means you have some free time backstage. What did you do during that free time? Were you working on like submissions only? What were you doing?
I totally was. Yeah, I had an
Yeah.
hour break, which was
Oh
kind of
wow.
Epic.
awesome.
Epic.
So we were filming season, I guess it was season 2 of Submissions Only, during I, I was like rehearsing for Newsies during the day. We would occasionally film for like an hour or two at night. And then once we got into the run, it was all kind of happening in real time. Like we were opening Newsies and season 2 was launching and we were shooting it at the same time. So I would go on set at like 7 a.m. and we would shoot all day. And then I would at night do the first act of Newsies and then like export like stuff off of the drives and like be editing. And then also one thing that I got to do was make all of these like backstage video blogs, which now are
Oh,
so
yeah.
ubiquitous.
I
But
loved those. Oh my god, I watched
Yes.
those religiously. I loved those so much.
I mean, I'm so glad that I have those, because I feel like I have a rare just documentation of that whole process.
Yeah.
But Disney and Tom Schumacher, who is the head of Disney theatricals in particular, I think very early on, it was when I was in Mary Poppins, saw the value in that, and
Mm.
a lot of the other, I think, producers, when I was in a show and making like little backstage video blogs, they were like, "Oh, that's cute, that's nice," and Tom Schumacher was like, "Yo, this is like great marketing and a great way to um, broaden just our audience, because right now there are only 1,100 people who get to see Newsies, and it's usually people who have enough money to get to New York, people who are going to be able to shell out for a ticket. And that's just leaving a huge group of people
Hmm.
without the ability to kind of experience the show. And he really saw value in it and gave me a lot of the tools and a lot of the permissions that had never really been given to create fun, like supplemental content, which I think in part made the fansies like the most rabid, amazing fan base
Yes.
ever, because they felt
Oh
like
my
they
gosh.
knew us.
True.
That's so cool. You can like basically say that I started that Broadway backstage like exclusive videos, like
I
series that
mean, I
literally
won't go
every show
so
does now.
far, but I definitely feel like I definitely saw value in it. I think before a lot of folks were realizing that
Yeah.
that is a great way to get to know your cast and feel
You
a
were
like
you
personal
were ahead
connection.
of the game.
Yes. Ahead of the
Now,
game.
meanwhile, I'm just trying to catch up with y'all. I'm like, what's
No.
TikTok?
What's TikTok? Oh my
We're
god.
actually the only two teens in like the world who don't have TikTok.
Oh my
So
gosh.
We are not
we're
very
I have
active
it
on
and I
that.
will watch it, but the stuff that
Yeah.
folks are creating, I'm like, that looks hard.
and all the transitions, like I don't know
Oh
how
my
to do
gosh.
that.
Yeah, I feel
I'm
like I
like
have been an early adopter of like every social network because I've just put a lot of stock in that. And
mhm.
this is like the one time where I'm like, Grandpa needs help plugging in the VCR. Like, I feel like I'm maybe too old for it.
Oh my gosh.
It was bound to
Okay,
happen.
so it was bad. Um, so you going back to Sydney's question before that she kind of hinted at,
Mhm.
you played crutchy in Newsies and you walked around with her crutch. So did you have to like how was that learning how to like walk with a limp and like what was that like choreography wise? And I feel like if it's almost like a dialect where like I feel like it could like slip and you could kind of forget and go back to the like way you usually walk and talk or whatever.
Oh,
So
totally.
did you have like like did you have anything that happened like that?
Well, right away when I read the script, there's like no mention of like why is Crutchy disabled? Like what's going on there? And so that's kind of up to me. I ended up reading a lot about like the time period and watching some documentaries and saw that right around that time was when polio started like really hitting young folks
Mm,
in New York, especially people in poverty. And I'm like, oh, that makes sense. So I watched a lot of videos on like what happens to people's musculature when they're infected with polio, and kind of went with that. And I'm like tried out a bunch of stuff in the rehearsal room. And then for like the choreography, a lot of times Chris Catelli would be like, okay, we'll just learn it like this and see how you have to modify like what you're going to need to switch your right arm to your left arm because your right arm's holding the crutch. There's just a lot of like playing around. I would always feel so bad though after I would like come out of the stage door when like celebrities came and saw the show and they'd all be like, "Are you okay?" Like that looks like
oh,
it must have been so painful.
oh my
Like
god.
meanwhile, there are kids doing like backflips off of tables in tap shoes. Like they're working so much harder than me. Like their bodies are hurting. I get off like pretty easy. I'm like on the side of the stage, like, all right, guys.
Yeah, like
It's
Ryan Steele with his fouette turns
Yeah,
and Jess Laprado, Tommy Bracco with their
I mean,
backflips.
yeah, I will not pretend like my job was very hard in comparison.
well, it's so interesting that you say that because it's funny that like all of the roles you've played, it just like are the roles that people instantly fall in love with. And like, do you ever like feel? Do you like to be the good guy, or do you like ever feel like you want to be like an antagonist in a way?
Oh, sure. I mean, yeah, I mean, I love a challenge, but no, I feel
Yeah.
like one of the reasons that I get cast as the roles I get cast at is I just try to bring as much of me to whatever project I'm working
Yeah.
on. And I feel like those roles just end up being like that. Not saying that, well, it's just because I'm super charming, but
You
I'm
are.
generally have high serotonin levels. I'm like pretty much happy. I don't take myself too seriously. So I think it's more so that the roles that I'm cast as are ones that are not that different from who I am.
Mm,
Mm, that
that
makes
makes sense.
sense.
Yeah, because then you can bring genuineness to the role.
Oh, well, thank you. I try.
I also like love your just face too much. Like because you look at your face and you're like you just I don't know, you just have such a light, a bright face. So
Oh, thank
if
you.
you were playing like an antagonist, I would probably be like, "Oh, I still love you though."
Do you know who Joe Serafini is?
Yes. Wait. Yes.
He's
How
in
do I
the
know?
High School Musical, the series.
Oh, yes, yes, yes. Totally, totally.
Yes. So he was actually like one of our first guests. And this entire time, I've literally been like, they need to play each other's like older brother and younger brother.
Oh my gosh,
Like,
I love
do you
that.
kind of see that?
Oh,
I
for
don't know.
sure. I think did
I
he
love
also
it.
go to Michigan? I think he maybe went to Maryland
Yes.
Water. So totes, yeah.
Oh
I
my
see
God,
him on
so many
Instagram.
connections.
I don't know him, but I'm like, you're doing really well, sir.
Yes. He's the best. He's just one of the kindest people, but no surprise there
Oh, I
in the
love it.
theater world. So yes, so Sydney introduced you and she mentioned that you were a director and have two award-winning short films called Sign and Ceiling Fan. So while you were directing, like, has that helped you as an actor? And would you consider doing like more directorial projects in the future? Like, is that kind of a route you want to explore?
For sure. I definitely think being a director has made me a much better actor, especially with film, where I just really didn't have very much experience.
Mm,
Because I didn't do a lot of film until I was older. And just getting to look through a lens and see what people were doing and then see how it was captured. And sometimes there was a disconnect. And sometimes you would see other actors like it wouldn't really read as big in the room, and then when you would see it on the camera it would be completely different. And so yes, I definitely think it helped also that with like a sign and ceiling fan, it was a smaller cast, but like when I was directing submissions only, there were at least 30 people in every episode. And because it
mm.
was one of the earlier web series, like we just didn't have trouble getting like awesome guest stars who we totally did not deserve. Like people like Audra McDonald and like Cheetah Rivera and Judith Light, all of whom were like, I don't know what a web series is, but this seems nice. So just getting to be in a room for 3 seasons and seeing all these luminaries in our business and seeing how they approach like a random project was so fascinating. And just getting to see their craft. It was also I remember watching Judith Light. She's like in our final episode, and we gave her this role that had like 8 pages of dialogue, and it was basically all monologues. And we're like, there's no way this woman, she's in a show right now. She's so busy. It was like the year she won a Tony. She was like doing campaigning, and she came in like off book, making choices and just like stealing the show in a way that I'm like, I want to be that person. I want to give my attention. If I agree to do something, I want to be that generous with my talent and with my time and never discount anything. So it was just a good lesson to learn.
Wow.
Period. Yeah. That's amazing.
I love hearing stories like that of legends in like the behind the scenes, how hardworking they are. But
Oh
like
my
that's how
God.
they get to where they are.
Yeah, it's so true. And I even remember like Audra McDonald, we would like do a few takes and then she would ask us for direction. You're like, what am I gonna say? Like, no, do it better. But the fact that she is still at a place where she's like, I just want it to be good and I want it to be good for everyone. You're like, yep, never stop learning. That is why you are who you are. Meanwhile, I'm sure we gave her terrible direction. I'm
No.
sure we were very tongue tied. Like, maybe try it like this.
It's so true though, like just doing like just creating your own work and like having people like just come in like kind of like this podcast and you just like learn so much from each individual and each individual has something unique that they bring and it's even like something as little as like this where people can only listen to your voice. Like it's really incredible, and like just listening to other people's stories and like how they approach their acting and their craft and all of that is just so fascinating.
Totally agree.
Now, before we go, Andrew, I wanted to ask you about something. You also have two siblings, Celia Keenan Bolger and Maggie Keenan Bolger, who are also in the business. Very multi-talented family. What's that like for you? Did you ever like bond with them over this, or is it nice to have someone to talk to who understands the situations that you've been in, auditions, shows, jobs?
Yeah, I think I feel so lucky. All three of us have been performing kind of like as a little troupe since we were very young.
Oh.
Celia's a little bit older than Maggie and I, and we just grew up seeing her perform and immediately knew that that's what we wanted to do. Also, I feel like maybe our parents were like, this carpooling will be easier if all three of you are cast in the same thing. Um, so who knows? If she was like a tennis pro, maybe I'd be good at tennis. Probably not. But uh, and I do feel incredibly lucky to have two people in the business who understand the nuances and the kind of neuroses that go into trying to do this professionally. Um, and then one thing that my husband just came home. My dog is going wild in the background. And one thing that I also do feel like a lot of people ask us, they're like, "Are you ever jealous of each other?" And I feel lucky in that it could not be farther from my mind to ever be jealous of my siblings. I think I am so in awe of their talent. And I think that we're lucky in that the three of us are in the business, but do very different things. We've really
Mhm.
carved out different paths for ourselves. My sister Maggie runs like a nonprofit theater for women and trans people and does a lot of directing and devising. And then Celia gets to do a lot of plays, and I do more like musicals and then writing and creating. So that it takes zero effort for us to be really insane cheerleaders for each other. I feel so lucky. Sydney, what about you? I mean, I knew your brother before I knew you, and was then so amazed to learn that he had a sister who was also a performer.
Yeah, I mean, I same thing as you. I think it also helps because we Jake and I did do similar projects, but we never went out for the same things because
Mhm.
he was a boy, I was a girl. We would just get just different roles. Uh, but exactly, it's the most. I mean, when I first got Fun Home, I it was a very it was Oh, actually, I funny enough, I almost did Tuck Everlasting. I was almost the
Oh my
understudy
god.
for
Right.
Sarah,
Yeah, I forgot
and
about that.
I know, and I had to choose between, going to where was it, playing at
Um,
that time?
it was going to go to Atlanta or Boston.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah.
I was gonna be the understudy, but then I also, I had Fun Home, a very, very early stage of Fun Home. And I ended up going with Fun Home. And around the time that I was doing the lab of Fun Home, I was doing Matilda auditions, and I got to the like 11th callback where there were just 8 girls left. I was one of the 8. I was, I think 8 girls. Yeah, I was one of the 8 girls. And and I ended up not getting Matilda. I ended up not getting Matilda, but what I wanted so badly from Matilda, I kept asking my mom. I was like, "Mom, I want to go see Newsies. If I get Matilda, I want that. I want that as like a present. I want to go see Newsies." I wanted to see it so bad.
Oh
But
my
then I didn't
god.
get Matilda, and I was like, "Great, I'll never go see Newsies ever." And then my brother got Newsies, and I got to see it 23 times. And and so, it was just perfect, and I loved it, and I love seeing him in shows. He's not doing acting anymore, he's gonna be a neuroscientist. Um,
What?
Yeah. Her brother is genius.
Just smarty
lit
pants. Yeah,
he's
I mean, you
Yes.
could tell even back then.
he's a
Mhm.
smarty pants. But yeah, same thing as you. I absolutely adored watching my brother and stuff.
Yeah, I feel like we are so lucky. Eli, do you have siblings?
Yeah, I do. It's funny because we all are in like the entertainment field, but all in different like completely different fields because like my sister's an editor and like a photographer and videographer. And
Cool.
she actually edits this podcast for us.
Oh,
Yeah.
Yeah, she's the best. And then my brother is like a marketer and stuff like that. So he does all of like press and all of that kind of stuff that he works for. He works for like Barstool.
oh yeah.
It's yeah, it's and then yeah, Tessie's like still in college in Marymount, doing uh digital media production, and she helps us with this. So yeah,
That's
we
so
like to
great.
cheer each other on. And it's also really like great because it really just like I can kind of like pro- well, Tessie produces the content and like films it, but like I'm the content person, I guess,
Yeah.
like the person who's yeah, and then like Zach can like deal with all like the social media stuff, so like it's just like a perfect combination of everything.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
We are
And
very lucky.
Yes, for
what's
sure.
also really cool about having a sibling in the business is Jake and I kind of like lucked out in that we got to like do the Tony Awards together. And I'm someone who when I
Not a big deal, just
Tough sauce.
casual.
I'm someone when I like to do things, I like to do it with a partner. I don't always like working alone. And so I I got to I wasn't like alone. I first of all, he we would help each other with auditions. We'd help each other
Mhm.
memorize and go through auditions. But literally for the Tony Awards, he was in King and I was in Fun Home. We were in the in memoriam together. We were singing. We were part of the like chorus in the background, and we got to, we just got to meet up at the end of the day and just hug each other and be like, "Whoa, what a day!
This is wild.
This is
Yeah, that's
wild."
yeah, that's amazing. Yeah, I always think back to like um just my parents when I remember there was like a honestly on the Tonys too for there was a year that Newsies and Peter and the Starcatcher we both opened within like a few days from each other. Um and just being like our parents they would have never believed this if we
Yeah.
got to tell them all that hard work that you were putting in and all those long drives like this may end up paying out like a little bit in just like
Wow.
street cred back in Michigan.
Yeah, our parents deserve so much thanks, man.
Yeah,
Yeah,
truly.
Thank you, mom and dad,
Yeah.
and grandma and
truly,
grandpa.
my gosh.
Yes. Well, thank you, Andrew, for coming on and just chatting with us. We had a blast. Just yeah, just thank you for doing this.
Of course, it is it's so nice to connect with you, especially right now when it
Hmm.
sometimes feels like our business is just nothing going on. It is good to know that there are folks like you who are uh, doing the good work and bringing our little slice of magic to a bigger audience. And I
Oh,
wish you so much luck on this project. I'm so excited to be like listening along now.
thank
Thank
you,
you. That means so
Andrew.
much.
Of course,
And
of
now
course.
you're a part of it.
I
Yeah.
love it. Friend of the pod.
Yeah.